Transformers 1. I saw Transformers 1
Whoa!
in the theater. When you make a comic that's for these, like for one of these like big properties or whatever, something I did in one of my comics makes its way into like a movie or a toy or something, has like a life beyond, the comic that I made. It happens from time to time. And so in Transformers 1, like it was good. I enjoyed it. I thought, it was, the tone was interesting. And there's a scene in it where one of the characters uses GoBots as a pejorative, where it's like an insult. She's like, we just ran into a couple of GoBots back there. And that warmed my heart because like, I'm the one who brought that, like that was Transformers versus G.I. Joe. Like I was the one who introduced the idea into the Transformers universe of people calling Transformers GoBots as like a pejorative, as an insult. So that has, somebody saw that and was like, okay,
we gotta put
we're going to put that in the movie. And then the other thing was there's like a scene where Megatron and Optimus Prime are like fighting each other. And Optimus Prime gets like a giant hole blown into his chest, and he gets knocked backwards and falls into a pit into like the depths of Cybertron, just like what was in my Transformers versus G.I. Joe. And then like Transformers versus G.I. Joe, as he's falling into the depths of Cybertron, he has like this like metaphysical encounter with, like, in his death, he goes on this sort of spirit journey where he's like renewed, and then sort of comes back, with like renewed purpose and stuff. So again, like, who knows? But it's, like when I made Transformers versus G.I. Joe, I looked at all the existing stuff. Like, that's what you do. You look at everything that came before, and you kind of try to come up, you try to fish for like some cool stuff you can put in. So I'm sure, you're making my comic made a pretty big splash. I'm sure that's like part of the required reading when you're making like a Transformers or a G.I. Joe. So there's that. And then the one other thing was like having the surface of Cybertron have like vegetation and stuff growing on it. And then sometimes like in the caves, it'll be this sort of like moldy kind of vegetation that you'd have, the sort that you'd have growing on like the inside of an engine, or, just like vegetation. And that was like another thing that like I introduced in Transformers versus G.I. Joe, was this idea of like vegetation, like growing on Cybertron and sticking to it, So those were just some things. So it makes me very hopeful that when they make this, because there is a Transformers G.I. Joe movie. It's called Transformers / G.I. Joe. It's not called Transformers versus G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
But like, it makes me think that they might be, we might see more stuff,
exciting.
From the comic that I did with John Barber.
Like, no way that they're not like, they don't have your comic and they're like pouring over it.
Yeah, because I mean they do take stuff from like the IDW comics, and that was like an IDW comic. Like, this kind of predates our show, so I don't think we ever talked about this, but there was a Transformers movie called like the Transformers The Last Night, or The First Night, or something.
I kind of remember that, but I don't think I've seen that one.
Okay, because that one, the Transformers, like, it was with, and that one was like the first movie where I was like, okay, they read my comic, and they used my comic as like source material for this one.
Which one had Mark Wahlberg in it? Was that this one?
Yeah, this one had Mark Wahlberg in it. Like, I saw it in the theater, and it was Cybertron is, well, first of all, it starts off in like the Knights of Arthur kind of days. Yeah. So it's, and I mean, Transformers versus G.I. Joe, a big part of it was like, what was how was humanity relating to the Transformers in ancient days? So I had like druids interacting with the Transformers. I had sort of like Scottish Highlander kind of characters interacting with the Transformers, and tying it into Destro's like Scottish ancestry and stuff, and I had like Vikings and Transformers, but I didn't have Knights of Arthur. Like, I don't think there were Knights of Arthur. Like, the Knights of Arthur was going on just down the street from the Druids and stuff, but it did feel kind of like familiar. It's like they're like, it felt like like maybe they were influenced by what I did.
Of
But again,
course,
it's Knights of
yeah.
Arthur, so it's a little like I didn't do Knights of Arthur. This is true. I did not do Knights of Arthur, but I was sort of in that vein, taking Transformers there, where I hadn't really seen other examples of that, prior to this. But that was kind of minor. The big thing where it was like, oh, they read my comic was in my comic and in this movie, the Cybertron is moving towards Earth.
Okay.
It's moving towards Earth, and it's growing these giant horns that are kind of like similar to Unicron. So Cybertron's growing these horns, and as it gets closer to the Earth, and then when it comes to the Earth, those horns they like scrape across the moon, and then the horns like dig in to the Earth. And in this movie, the same thing happens. Cybertron's coming towards Earth. It's growing these horns, and then the horns, and at the same time, like they're not G.I. Joe. They're not called G.I. Joe in the movie. They're called G.I. Joe in my comic. They're not called G.I. Joe in the movie. But the G.I. Joe team are going to Cybertron. These soldiers are going to Cybertron, as it's sort of coming towards Earth, and that there's the horns, and they're sort of climbing up the horns, and stuff. Like it's all stuff from my comic. And then at the end they kind of have this reveal that Earth has been a transformer the whole time. Earth is now again, like they took a bunch of ideas from my comic. I think the big problem with the movie, they didn't take enough ideas, and they kind of toned them down, because in my the Earth being a transformer is sort of shown in sort of spectacular fashion, where in this movie it's just sort of like a line of dialogue. But again, I sort of came out of the theater and I was like, I don't know how to feel about this, because it is pretty exciting that like I made something that was so cool, but it's also like my name's not anywhere in that. If I tell people, they're just gonna be like, yeah, whatever, dude. Whatever. But I just thought I'd talk about it here, since we have a show. I didn't have a show back then, but I have a show now, so I can kind of talk about it. But it's also like, because a lot of this happens for a lot of people who work on these big properties, is that and again, like I had the same option. It's like other people had worked on these properties before me, so I was picking and choosing from what had come before, from all sorts of sources within these universes. And so I knew while I was doing it that people would come along after me and pick and choose and come out of my stuff. Like a lot of people react to it in different ways too. Like there's some, especially with these like Marvel things, there have been some and DC movies and stuff, there have been some people saying like, hey, that entire movie was based on comics that I wrote, and I don't even get invited to the premiere, or some, stuff like that. And like, for me, I'm not saying that, like, for me, it was like, I knew the deal going in, but I came into comics and stuff, like, I wanted to leave a mark. Like, I wanted to make something and like be part of something. Like, I didn't want to just watch the world go by. I wanted to like be an active participant in things and change things and have an effect. So like, when someone takes something like that and builds on it and puts it in a movie, it is pretty exciting. Like,
it's so awesome, man. Transformers versus G.I. Joe is one of my favorite things ever.
Oh,
in
thanks,
any
man.
like,
Thanks.
It's so great, Tom.
Thank you, Matt. It speaks well of the possibility that like this Transformers G.I. Joe movie is not going to just like completely ignore what I like. Like I get the feeling that it's going to like I would love it. Like I would love
impact,
it. Like
brother.
I'm not complaining in any way, shape, or form. Like anytime I see one of these movies, like when we saw Black Panther 2, I kind of had in the back of my head like I was kind of a little bit excited watching it, because it occurred to me like, wait, what if that giant panther robot, Panthrax Pantherion, that I put in Fantastic Four Grand Design, what if that shows up? And that it's possible. It didn't. But the possibility was kind of exciting. I mean, there's a Fantastic Four movie coming up, and I am kind of curious, because we've seen there's been very little of the Fantastic Four in these Marvel movies. Like there've been a couple cameos here and there, like Doctor Strange and in Wolverine, Deadpool, but we haven't had like a big we haven't had a big Fantastic Four thing since I did Fantastic Four Grand Design in the movie. So I am I'm curious, like, oh, is there going to be some of my stuff in the Fantastic Four movie? Yeah.
Dude, I haven't checked. How close are we to a launch of this of the movie Transformers for the new
Transformers
versus
slash GI Joe.
G.I. Joe?
If it was called Transformers versus GI Joe, then I'd be like, okay, get ready to see a lot of my stuff in it. But I think it's supposed to come out next year. But I haven't heard anything about like anything from it, so we'll see.
I know it's gonna be a Transformers versus G.I. Joe feast in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there were, I get the feeling that, because Michael Bay directed that Transformers movie with like the Knights of Arthur in it and stuff, and I get the feeling that Michael Bay is aware of my work because, I did a lot of sort of comics journalism and stuff, and I wrote a review of like one of the Transformers movies that I feel was like the most like intellectual engagement with the Michael Bay Transformers movie. So I feel like he had to have read, because it was like this very scholarly, very intellectual, like deep dive into like what makes these Michael Bay movies tick. And I find it hard to believe that like he didn't. That. Yeah, he didn't. He was not aware of it. So
from the desk of Michael Bay, you get like a
right. Yeah, like his stationery. Although they've made a bunch of Transformers movies since then, and I have not been called in to consult on any of them. So who knows? Maybe
yeah, like
I would, but I'm putting it out there. Like, if you need a consultant for the Transformers versus GI Joe movie, I mean, I put a ton of stuff in that initial series, but I have a boatload of other things that never made it to. And one thing, because that Transformers 1, it's kind of like the origin of the Transformers. It's sort of like the early days and stuff. And that scene that I'm talking about where Optimus Prime gets shot in the chest and has this like giant hole and falls into a pit. When I did that was like the end of an issue, and then the next issue I was going to do the origin of the Transformers. Like I was going to do like an origin story of young Optimus Prime, young Megatron, young Alita 1. I had this whole story worked out. They were going to be sort of like prize fighters. They were going to be like, they would do these like exhibition matches, so almost like a traveling gladiator circus with like a circus train that like travels around Cybertron. And they were sort of like, even in that sort of brutal environment, they were sort of young and optimistic and hopeful about the future. It was going to be like, Orion Pax and stuff. And I wrote this whole story, and that was going to be the next issue. But at the last minute, I thought about it, and I thought, like, you know what? I just, seemingly killed off Optimus Prime. So for the next issue, I thought, I can't just have like more Optimus Prime. I need Optimus Prime to go away. Like I killed him. And so let there be a space where he's gone and people are feeling his absence. So so instead, at the last minute, I created this story of like an origin story of Destro and somewhat of like the early visitations of the Transformers to Earth. But like, so I sort of, shelved that origin story with young Orion Pax, young Megatron, and young Alita 1. And that was never published. So I still have that in my notebook. So again, like, and it's fully fleshed out. I've done some stuff on my Patreon where I would take elements from that script and kind of make it into like something different. So I've done a little bit of that on my Patreon. But that's, so again, like if you're looking for a consultant on any of these Transformers movies, I've got a lot of material and new stuff too. You put me in one of those writers' rooms, and I'm
you're
good to go.
Fire on all cylinders.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to get this off my chest. I just wanted to talk about it.
Dude, this is awesome. Like
some food for thought. And I'm Tom Scioli, author of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater. Speaking of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater, like just the way these properties work when you're working on them, like if they come out with like Godzilla -2 or whatever.
Oh my God.
And it's got Jay Gatsby in it. Like, I'm not going to chalk that one up to coincidence. I think it's cool. It means that I made something really cool that meant something, that registered, and that people felt it was worthy of carrying. Like, I have no like
ill will
or anything about it. I mean, it is a little, because it is a little weird that you do these things and then your name's not on the thing. And but again, that's part of the deal. Like I sort of know that going in. I'm not you know what I mean? And I sort of know that going in. And although, Marvel has recently been having sort of like thank yous in their credits to
Oh,
like different people who've done things from the comics. So I don't know, like maybe Hasbro will get there eventually too. None of the Transformers movies that I saw ever like really delivered what I was looking for. Until this one, Transformers 1, I felt like gave me what I was looking for. But again, it's like it's a different kind of like it's an animated movie where those like Michael Bay Transformers movies, they're trying to make Transformers but in a form that can be sort of like a blockbuster movie. So you have to center it around big stars and you got to see those stars face. Where like an animated movie, it's like there's still big stars in it. Chris Hemsworth is in it. John Hamm is in it. Keegan Michael Key is in it, like as voices, but it's Scarlett Johansson, but it's like a little, it's a little different. So like they were trying to do that, but and there's been sort of like Netflix animated Transformers and stuff that do cool stuff. It's like when you start getting like real people in there too.
Yeah.
It's a tricky line to walk,
Yeah, it's like because they have to get some like screen time, unfortunately.
Right, because I think fans of Transformers, and myself included, you want to see like as much Cybertron as possible, and you want to see as much of like the Transformers interacting with each other. You care less about them interacting with, again, some like nice family, like Earth family or whatever. Like you feel less tied to
like a special thanks to Tom Scioli.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath for it.